Welcome to the House of You Day of the Interview seminar. I am your host and founder of the House of You, author, professor, and life coach, Justin Allen Hayes. This seminar has been crafted to give you the best practices both from the professional and the social emotional perspectives on the day of the interview, which is can be one of the most stressful days of our lives. First though, I'm going to cover the pre-work to be completed before the day of the interview. This lowers stress and offers you the best opportunity for success on the day of the interview. I know earlier in my career, I didn't put much time and thought into pre-work. I thought it was too much to do. I would do it the day of the interview. But later in my career, I started to have high levels of anxiety on the day of the interview. And some of that is warranted, but there's others that can be mitigated or worked out in your mind and worked out ahead of time as you prepare for the day of the interview. So first, we're going to cover several of these. And when I finish covering these, it will seem a little bit overwhelming, and that's okay. But from experience, from 20 years of professional experience, from being in the classroom 9 years, I've really understood that the more preparation, the more things you can do ahead of time is going to be better, because you're not going to be worrying about those the day of the interview when there's already going to be various amounts of stress laid on you. The first is the time and the date of the interview. So very basic, very simple, but just knowing the day and the time zone, depending on where the operations for the company you are interviewing for is at. For example, if you live in North Canton, Ohio, and you're on Eastern Daylight Time, which is the same as New York, and the company you are interviewing with is in Chicago, Illinois, and they are on Central Daylight Time, you will want to make sure to adjust your schedule ahead of time to know that if the interview is to take place at 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, or is that 3 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So something very simple, very easy to overlook, and I've done it myself. So that's one thing to take into account. The cover letter. The cover letter for some companies has gone away, but for others it has remained the same. And that is to give employers an idea at a higher level, a more focused approach of how you and your experience and your background is going to help them in their company and make you an asset of the organization if you were to be hired. Your references, having those compiled ahead of time, if not needed for the profile, the application process, having those handy on the day of the interview is another best practice to take into account. So locate potential professors, coaches, an individual that you have worked with, maybe if you are in an outside band, a church group, whatever that may be, family member, friends. Those individuals are going to be helpful in helping you secure and validate you as the best person for that job. So having that done ahead of time is very easy to do, but again, something we want to just take into account. Business cards. So my students, they give me a lot of flack sometimes about business cards. So I come into class the first day, introduce myself, introduce the class that we were taking, and pass out one of my business cards that has my name, the founder of the House of You, phone number, email address, basic, easy to find information. And individuals say, especially my students, well, I don't have my own business. How can I put a business card together? And my response is very easily. So one of the reasons I hand out my business card is to give students the template to be able to swap out my information. I even go into Vistaprint or other organizations that I print my business cards with and give them literally the template and say, you know what, take my logo, swap that out for Walsh University, swap that out for where you are interning at. Put your name, if you're a student, if you're an intern, if you want to have your phone number, your email address, if you want to have your socials, handles, put on that. That's something to do, and it's very easy. Put the information you're comfortable with, not asking to put information that you're not comfortable with. That if somebody were to email you and say, hey, Justin, I got your business card at this career event. I'm reaching out to see if we could talk about a role that we have open. So that's where business cards come into play. Anybody can do that. A portfolio. A portfolio is not for only fashion design students or individuals with the more creative skill set. It's also for anybody. And what a portfolio does, it highlights the best work that you've done. If you're a student, those projects you work on, put samples of that, the ones that you're proud of. So what that's going to do to an employer on the day of the interview is show them that not only can you talk about your background and have your resume, but you have actual works that show that you have and are best suited for that position, and that while yes, you are a student, you've taken the lead on group work, you've had presentations on local businesses and helped them in one way or the other. So a portfolio is helpful. Another way it's helpful on the day of the interview is you're able to take some of that stress of all the eyeballs looking at you while you are answering questions, and you're able to lay that portfolio on the table and show and page through the specific examples, the specific projects that you worked on. So everybody's not focusing their attention on you, they're focusing it on the portfolio at hand. And I found that that's helpful. Even if it is 30 seconds or a minute of that interview where the individuals aren't focusing their attention on you, you'd be surprised how just a little bit will help lower your stress level. A bottle of water. So this is something that I used to think, well, I can't bring anything to an interview besides my resume, my portfolio, my cover letters. But then as time went on, as me being a manager and doing the interview, I would see candidates come in with a bottle of water. And so yeah, we're not talking any alcoholic beverages, talking a bottle of water. So if that's the actual bottle itself, or if it is in a mug like this, the one I have here, feel free to bring that to an interview. Do all the things that will make you more comfortable. And I found over the years that the more talking I do, the more thirsty I get. So yes, I haven't gone out and ran a marathon, but I do get thirsty after speaking after a period of time. The same thing is for you and for me for the interview. Questions to ask. Something, again, that often I overlooked is I am interviewing the company as a candidate just as well as the company is interviewing me. So while I may be impressive and have great qualifications, great examples, a great portfolio, maybe the organization, we just don't mesh. Maybe it's the mission of the organization, and maybe you want to ask them a little bit about that. Maybe it's the product line. that they produce? Where do they get their parts or the materials for the products? Does that line up with a more socially responsible organization, or does it not? What's the workplace like? Now in the COVID era, the way most individuals are working from home in some instances, being able to work from home is really a privilege, but also something that should be asked about. If the organization does not freely offer that information, you definitely want to ask, just so you know, just so you have another piece of information. So when you go through that final process, if you are to receive an offer, you're able to look at all the past things, the past events that you've had with that organization, and check those off and say, yes, this meets my requirements, or no, it doesn't, or this one doesn't matter as much. So doing that ahead of time and having those questions in your portfolio is what I found the best way to remember, because we all have tons of ideas. How are they viewing me? Do they like the tie? Do they like the dress I wore? Do they like the jewelry I wore? Do they like my shoes? Do they like my answers? Am I giving too much eye contact? We have more than enough things to worry about and to take and occupy our mind, that one less thing to worry about is definitely the way to go. And then the questions that may be asked. This is an area that we all try to guess for the exact questions that an organization might ask. So we might reach out to maybe a friend, a family member, works for this organization. So maybe we reach out to them and ask them what their interview process was like, what types of questions. And so you can, ahead of time, take those questions and craft your answers and go through a little bit of that memorization of that answer that you will give if asked that question. Your LinkedIn profile. So this is something that 9 years ago, when I started to teach here at Walsh University, I had it as a requirement for class, was to just create a LinkedIn profile. It's free. You put as much information, as little information as you want. But the reason I wanted my students then, as well as now, it's just as commonplace as a resume, is that being a manager and going through the interviewing process of candidates, LinkedIn is one of the areas we would go to look at validating whether this individual has the correct information on their LinkedIn profile and that matches with their resume. So very, what can seem minor to some people is one of the areas that you want to take a look at. For example, let's say you are in the interview process and you are one of the top candidates for an organization for a particular role. And through the process, through their vetting, the organization takes a look at your LinkedIn profile to see if you have one versus other candidates. So let's say you have the LinkedIn profile and that aligns very nicely with what you have on your resume and what conversations have brought through. But maybe other candidates don't have the LinkedIn portfolio and profiles put together. That by itself might not exclude somebody from a job, but it is one way to, again, just check that box for an organization of, yep, this individual is legit, they're matching up both on kind of that social professional network of LinkedIn against their resume and against the interviews, the questionnaires, the profiles that you have created. A job offer worksheet. So within my book, The House of You, 5 Workforce Preparation Tips for a Successful Career, I have just that. I have the questions, the things that are most important, that if you are to receive a job offer, which you will, you'll receive multiple job offers, that ahead of the interview, what you do is you go in and you look at What's the most important? Is the salary the most important? Is whether there is a bonus important to you? Vacation, 401k, those types of things. And so what you do is you line all those up with, which if you have my book, it's right there and you can pull that workbook page out. If not, you can create it on your own. Create those top 5 to 7 things that are important to you when you will consider an offer. And so you'll go through, you'll list those, you'll weight them of, okay, the salary is the most important, so that is an A, and the second one would be a B, then C, then D, and so on. Then the next column, you actually put in that amount of what in this case, the salary you will need to be able to accept that job offer, given your financial situation, geographically, where the organization is at, and all the other factors, paid time off, vacation, where all those lead out. So when a job offer comes, the salary is going to be the first thing you look at, because that's number one, the most important. And then you look and say, okay, let's say $50,000 is the salary, the base, the minimum that we would accept. Then if the offer comes in at $40,000, then you're able to do that thinking internally to decide if you're able to make that work. Or, we'll talk about later, is negotiate to get that salary to a higher level if that organization and everything else being the same, that you will want to go forward and potentially accept an offer. But just knowing those things ahead of time, that is helpful. Why? Because when you receive an offer, it's exciting. A potential new job, potential salary, potential new organization, grow your professional, your networking skills. And so a lot of times emotion comes into play of, I gotta let my significant other know, I gotta let my parents, my friends, I gotta let them know. And then there's that comparison of, well, what are you making? Where are you working? And all those things. If you do that the day of the interview or after, it could be, again, more emotional setting, versus if you accomplish that ahead of time, it's just another resource you look at when the offer comes. You say, okay, please email me the verbal offer that you just extended to me. Please give me 24 hours to review it. And if we're talking an offer comes on a Friday, give the weekend. Ask the organization, can I let you know by 5 p.m. Your standard time? So if it's Central Time, it'd be 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, versus 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time would be the same. So that's just where that time zone comes into play. And so again, another piece of information that is helpful. For Zoom or Teams or the virtual interview, downloading that software ahead of time, if you don't already have it, is something that takes mere seconds to do. So that would be something that ahead of time, prior to the day of the interview, that you will want to have on your computer, your netbook, whatever device that you are going to be fielding that interview with. So you want to make sure that. Along those lines is making sure that device is charged. I've ran into that where the device wasn't charged, and in the middle of the interview, it cuts out. And so automatically say, oh, the internet went out, and then come to find this particular time my device died because I didn't take those few minutes to go ahead and charge that device. Sleep. So sleep is, again, one of the most, I think, underrated things that we really think about with anything, regardless of whether it's the day before a job interview or not. But sleep is important. The more sleep you can get, the more energized, the more you'll be able to dig for those deeper answers, because your body is going to have repaired itself through the prior night's sleep. And so whatever that sweet spot is for you, plan for that. Set that in your schedule. I myself actually do the two days before. Because for me, just one night of all of a sudden going to bed at, let's say, 11 p.m. or midnight, and then trying to go to bed at 9 or 10, it takes a few minutes to fall asleep, as we all can imagine. So find that sweet spot for you, but make sure you're rested. Sleep is something that you want to look at. Food and drink. Make sure you eat not only the day of the interview, which we'll talk about, but the days leading up to that. May seem, again, a little bit of a minor issue, but with myself going through my mental health journey, at my worst, I was eating carrots and hummus every day for my meals because my body was rejecting the other food I felt. I had so much anxiety just build up over the years, and I didn't take care of myself until 35 years into my life. So something that might seem minor for some individuals might not seem minor for some. So you just want to make sure that you're hydrated and have enough food. Reason being, some interviews go more than an hour or two, and so if you're used to potentially eating every 3 to 4 hours, and the interview goes 3 or 4 hours, you're going to want to adjust what your intake is prior to that time. So that's something to take a look at. The clothes you're going to wear for the interview, making sure they're pressed, they're washed, that they're available, that they're laid out. As for me, my mom did when I was younger. Of, okay, Justin, if you're going to wear these clothes to school the next day, you want to do that same thing. So again, there's some preparation. Whether that's laundry, whether that's the dry cleaners, those are things that you want to make sure that those are done. So the day of, you're not scrambling for what clothes to wear. The weather. So if you are driving to an office location for the interview, knowing if it being the weather is going to snow, if there's going to be ice or rain, if you live on particular areas where there could be hurricanes and maybe tornadoes, those are things you just want to take into account because it's going to affect your drive time, right? So maybe where you are interviewing at is 20 minutes away, but maybe there is some weather passing through that you may be potentially getting several inches of snow. And so you don't want to take that risk of, okay, are the plows going to be out? Are they not? Instead of worrying about that, just give yourself some extra time. And so that'll be helpful. I found myself in more than one interview where weather and the traffic came into play, where a sudden accident that happens, and all of a sudden, instead of arriving 10 minutes early, like I had planned, it was very close to the time that the interview started. So if that happens, you would want to contact the HR partner, human resources partner that you're working with, and let them know. Many times, actually I would say all times, I have had positive experiences when I've reached out. It's those times when I haven't, and I show up late and I'm expecting that everything's going to be okay. I arrive 10 minutes late and I haven't notified the organization. The direction. So again, many of us have smart devices where we're able to have GPS in our phone. So making sure that we have an idea of what those directions are, that those directions, that address has been inputted already into that GPS, that ahead of time, before the day of, that you actually go through and look at what the time is. Check out if you're going to be interviewing a little bit after the morning rush hour, maybe look a couple days during morning rush hour and see how long the directions are telling you that it's going to be. Is that 20-minute drive now 30 in rush hour, or is it the same? Or can you maybe take a different direction to that? Let's see. We're making great progress here. So drive by the office. Driving by the office is very helpful. It is helpful because you'll know, is there a guard gate that you will have to show your ID and have the guard let you into the parking lot? Is it a general parking lot where anybody in the public can park? Or do you have to park on the street? And if you park on the street, is there a meter that you pay there? Or is there an app you have to download, which I found in downtown Akron now? You download an app and then you pay through the app of parking on the street. And so those are things that you just want to know ahead of time. Again, it's one less curveball that you have to think about. Having your ID, your wallet, your purse ready, something very, very small, right? But almost every interview I've been to on site for security purposes, they ask for your ID. And so making sure you have that on you and with you is going to be something you don't want to overlook. And then thank you cards. So thank you cards. So I'm talking about the actual written ones, the old-fashioned way through the United States Postal Service. Have thank you cards ready to go to be sent after your interview. And so what can you do before the day of the interview? Well, you can address the envelopes and put your return address and have those ready. So if you're going to interview with 3 individuals, you'll know those individuals' names, and so you'll be able to have those pre-addressed. And so when the interview is over, you get home, or if you're really on the ball, if you have them with you in the car and you already have them stamped, you write the thank you in the car and then drop them off at the post office. So that's something minor, but I found even recently that when I don't take my own best practices advice, that it's just one more thing to worry about. So not only do I want to send a thank you email, but I want to send that thank you card. Everybody that I know likes to get mail. And I know from being a manager, interviewing 5 candidates and getting 1 thank you card, that's one piece of information that goes into kind of the plus column for that individual. So that'd be something to get put together. Okay, so lots of information, but I guarantee you, standing here today and on your screen, on your device, on your television, that doing some or all of what I just described is going to make the day of the interview be less stressful than what it already is going to be. So next, we're going to go into detail of the morning of the day of the interview. So along the lines of the sleep, right? You want to make sure that you hit your sweet spot for rest. If that's 7 hours, if it's 6, if it's 8. So you'll backtrack of, okay, I need to wake up at 8 a.m. So if 8 hours is my sweet spot, maybe I look at 11:30 to go to bed the night before, so that I can wake up with around the sweet spot for the hours and the time that I need rested. So that day of, you're gonna wake up rested and ready to go. When you wake up, you wanna follow your same routine that you do every day. So whether you get a shower first, you brush your teeth, you wash your face, you eat lunch, eat breakfast, take your vitamins, whatever that routine looks like, you want to keep that the same. So leave enough time to have that routine as same as possible, because it's going to be one less thing your brain's going to have to really think really deeply about, because you'll just be in a little bit of autopilot mode at that time. Then you're going to obviously have the clothes that you have laid out, set out, hanging, that you're going to change into for the day of the interview. You're going to collect your resumes if they're not already in a portfolio. You're going to collect your cover letters, the portfolio itself, your bottle of water, if there's any snacks that you might like on the way to the interview. And then again, you want to make sure to have a fresh bottle of water or mug of water, or you can even do a mug of tea. Again, please keep it non-alcoholic for obvious reasons. So that morning of is going to be as similar as the other mornings that you've had earlier that week throughout your life. And so again, by having the clothes already pressed, ready to go, having the food ready, having that routine be the same, you are going to be in a much better position to have those issues that could become issues of little things to worry about, to take brain capacity to think about. Those will be things that will be very, very helpful. Then, right before you leave, I recommend for number 3 is to have a final review of the things that you're taking. So maybe have a checklist, and you create that checklist again ahead of time of here are the 10 things that I need to take. I need to take the clothes, I need to take my keys, my wallet, my purse, my resume, my portfolio, my bottle of water, my snacks, whatever those things are. And then you just go, you check those off. There's been a number of times where small things like even a bottle of water, missing that, it plays on my mind because I knew ahead of time that I needed to bring a bottle of water. And if I didn't bring the bottle of water and I'm halfway to that interview, then what am I going to be looking for when I arrive at the interview location? I'm probably going to be looking for a water fountain or a way to have some water. Sometimes there's the filtered water that organizations have that you can have, and organizations are great about offering water usually to you. So that's something to keep in mind. But you don't want to put all your eggs in that basket thinking, oh, well, this organization is gonna offer me water, so I don't need to bring it. I've always found for myself, because of the anxiety that I have, that if I bring things myself, then I don't have to worry about if I'm offered the bottle of water. I don't have to worry about if the HR manager or the manager that is in that department I'm interviewing with, if they printed out my resume or not, if they printed out my cover letter or not. I just have the things. And so at the end of the day, I can look myself in the mirror and say, okay, Justin, you did the best you could with the information you had, and you were as prepared as you can possibly be. Now, whether you receive that job offer or you don't, that's something you can't control at the end of the day. But you can only control certain things, and so just focus your mind on that. Personally, I have found that that's easier said than done. It's easy to say, okay, Justin, I'm only going to focus on these 10 things, and then the mind starts to wander. Just shoot for that. That's the goal. Don't have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. Just shoot for as many of those things that you can take off the table of potentially being stress related that could affect your performance at that interview. So once you've made that final review, you will want to make sure that your car either has gas in it or has been charged if it's an electric powered car. So again, that's something to be done ahead of time as well. So you'll take all the things in your final review and you'll head out to the car. You'll have the GPS set in your phone, and you'll head out for the organization to have that interview. So now we're moving on to number 4, the drive or the ride to the office. So drive meaning you could be driving, maybe somebody else is driving you, maybe you're taking public transportation, if you have public transportation, maybe a subway, a train, to the organization you're going to be interviewing with. And so at this point, more for the individuals that are going to be doing the driving is please use GPS. GPS is very helpful. It usually gets you there the fastest way. You can sometimes avoid tolls and those small minor things. use familiar routes. So if you're used to driving on the highway, drive the highway. If you're used to driving the back streets, drive the back streets. Whatever makes you the most comfortable and that you can be on as much autopilot as possible, that your brain doesn't have to think extra like, oh wow, I usually take the highway, now I'm taking back roads. Am I gonna make it there on time? Are there four-way stops that could potentially be dangerous in an area that I'm not used to driving in? So again, take those things off the table. Take those familiar routes, and that's where looking at the GPS ahead of time, you'll have those options to go that direction. I try to plan to arrive 30 to 45 minutes ahead of the actual interview time. So if the interview time is 9 a.m., whatever time zone that you're in, you would want to plan to arrive at 8:15. And so by doing that, that gives you flexibility for traffic, for accidents, for potentially unexpected tolls, or maybe a deer across the road or geese crossing the road. And those little things that can just seem like a couple minutes, it gives you enough padding to be able to get to the office where you are interviewing at in a good amount of time. Number two, what that helps you do is it helps you, when you arrive, to go to that guard gate, show your ID. If the guard needs to call the organization and say, okay, Justin Hayes is at the gate, does he really have a 9 a.m. interview with Bob and Sue and Tim? And to get that might take a minute or two. So once all that takes place, you find your parking spot, and then you do what I call a quick review again. So right, you do a final review before you leave the house, the apartment, the condo, where you're living. You also want to do a quick review when you arrive. And so that might be just briefly scanning your resume, scanning those questions that you're expecting to be asked, scanning the questions that you do want to ask, information that you want to have with you, making sure you have enough resumes. If you're interviewing with 3 individuals, make sure you have maybe 5 or 6 in case another individual hops into an interview, which has happened to me. And individuals might be scheduled to travel, and those individuals might get back earlier than what they had intended, so maybe they hop into the interview. And so by just having those extra couple resumes, that just gives you the opportunity again to just look professional and look the part of working at that organization. So once you take that final review, maybe for me, I never used to listen to classical music, but it's the type of music that calms my mind down. And so that's the time where you get, as an athlete or a performer, you kind of get your game face on, you get your strategy ready. Here are the 3 things that I want to make sure that if I don't do anything else at this interview, that I am going to get across to this organization. They're going to know about my volunteer experience. They're going to know about my leadership experience. They're going to know that I like to achieve goals and set them, and that I work well in teams. Whatever those 3 high-level goals you want to have that organization come across in that interview, have that readily available. And again, just do a quick review. Because what's that going to also help you to do? Not only in the interview, so you accomplish those 3 goals in the interview. After the interview, you're going to be able to take those 3 things and include those in the bullet form into your thank you note. So you're just having that consistency from beginning, before the interview, the day of, during the interview, and then after the interview. So having that consistency, again, it's one less thing of, oh, what do I put in this thank you note, which I've been thinking to myself at many times before. So just having that consistency is very helpful. So now we're on to number 6, the actual interview itself. The interview itself could take the form of an in-person interview. It could take the form of a Zoom interview or Google Meets. Google Meets is one of the most favorite of many organizations. or it could be over the phone. And so either one of those methods could happen. I know for myself, I had an interview experience when, so I'm based here in North Canton, Ohio, and the organization I was interviewing with is based in Buenos Aires, Argentina, but my interview was with their North American operations in Houston, Texas. And so I flew down to Houston, woke up, did my pre-interview routine, got a ride to the office, and showed up for the interview. Come to find out that the director of the organization was not going to be there in person. This was at a time, showing my age a little bit, where there was the volcano ash situation in I think it might have been Iceland. One of those countries had an eruption of a volcano, and so the ash from that volcano affected air travel. And so this director of the organization was not able to fly to the United States to interview in person. So this was my first experience of interviewing with an individual in person, face to face, at an organization's office, as well as kind of what we call like our Zoom interview. So on the big screen was the individual who's the director, and then there was a webcam. So when I would be talking to this individual, I had to look kind of in the right direction, whereas the individual that was in the room was sitting to my left. And so little things like that, I wasn't prepared at that time. I didn't know what to expect. So again, just trying to show that there's many ways, many methods of interviewing. Now, for the phone interviews, for the Zoom, the Google Meets interviews, I would lay out all those things being your resume, your cover letter, your portfolio, the questions you want to ask, the questions you think might be asked of you. And so make it your home, right? So make things as easily accessible. And so know that if you're looking to the left, your resume is going to be there. If you're going to look to the right, it might be crafted answers to interview questions. Or you could have that in a Word doc on your computer itself, on your netbook, on your device, where you're able to have that in a smaller screen off to the side, and you're able to look through that. So that takes a lot of that stress with the driving and compiling all that information with you when you have those interviews over the phone, over Zoom, over Google Meets, etc. But in person, you want to bring those things obviously with you. And so when you arrive for that interview and you shake hands and say, "Hi, my name is Justin Hayes. It's a pleasure to meet you. Looking forward to our discussion," and take your seat where they want you to sit, and set things up that you're comfortable with, right? So you're going to have your bottle of water. So are you left-handed or right-handed? So is it easier to pick up a bottle of water with your right hand or left? Again, do you want to have your resume to the left, your portfolio in the middle, and questions to the right? Set those things up again that you've already went through, kind of like a performer. You've already gone through that practice, and so you know when you look to the left, or you look to straight down, or look to the right, you'll know where those particular items are. Again, seems like something small, but those little things are really helpful in making that interview process go much better and much quicker. So the two things that you want to make sure to get across to those individuals interviewing you are, you want to execute your game plan. So what are those three things that no matter how the interview goes, maybe you don't cover that in the hour interview, but at the end of the interview, you're asked, "Okay, Justin, is there anything else you'd like to add?" Then you say internally to yourself, "Okay, Justin, we didn't discuss thing 1, 2, and 3 that's on our strategy, on our game plan," and you lay that out and you share that with that organization. Secondly, You want to be thinking throughout that whole interview process why you are the best fit for that position. So whether you are a college student, whether you're coming out of high school, going into the trades, whatever that may be, what are those reasons and those things that make you the best fit for that job, so that when those three hypothetical interviewers are regrouping after the interview, sit and talk about how your interview went, that there's no question that you're the best fit for that role. And so you also want to think about ahead of time, what could potentially be things that other candidates that I might be in competition for this role have. And so that might be something like maybe with my background in marketing, maybe all the individuals that are being interviewed have that background in marketing, have that marketing degree. And so I want to focus on, okay, well, not just I have a bachelor's in business administration, a focus in marketing. I want to focus on those actual specifics, those things that I have done, those things that I've accomplished. Maybe you have decided to start your own company, and so you might be in the works of preparing the paperwork, getting social media accounts set up. Those types of things you want to have in kind of your back pocket, that like, oh, by the way, not only am I qualified for this role in this way, I'm qualified in this way as well. And so I'm doing multiple things that, take your pick, right? So it's like that law of averages. If you give enough information, enough positive information, that vibe, those individuals are going to have a lot to choose from versus the individual that gives less. Next, you're going to want to make sure that at the end of the interview, so you executed your game plan, and you've already had the questions that you want to ask, that you think that are going to be asked of you. You want to also, before you leave, hand them your business card, right? So you're going to say, oh, here's my business card, can I have yours? And you want theirs for a couple of reasons. One is kind of just to check that box. But two, you want to have that contact information that maybe when you send out those thank yous, maybe for one reason or another, maybe those individuals spell their name a little bit differently than what Human Resources had told you. And so you want to make sure that you just take that information verbatim off of that business card and transfer that onto the envelope for your thank you note. And again, it makes you look just that one more step professional. 3 candidates have an interview, and one has a business card. That one that has the business card, that being you, you're going to have a better chance at that organization. And by executing your game plan, which you've already preset, so you know what you need to succeed and why you're the best fit for that job, coupled with the things that you worked on maybe days, maybe the day before your interview, of having those resumes printed, getting your sleep, all those things I already discussed. Those things are going to be super helpful, so that when I'm talking right now about the actual interview itself, it might seem like, well, is that all? You went into so much detail about the pre-work and the things to do ahead of time. And yes, that is all, because all that pre-work's been done, that you're able to just focus on the game plan. And so I think of, let's say, a football player, and they play 16 teams. They're going to have a game plan for each of those 16 teams. And so if during that week of preparation, that's all they do is prepare plays to go against that particular team that week, they're going to be in a much better position than maybe that week they're going to have a potential of running 10% of the total plays in the playbook. And so let's say there's 100 plays in the playbook for an offense, and 10% of those are ones that are going to be implemented for that game. It's going to be much easier and much better to just focus on those 10, that percent, instead of trying to implement every single thing over the course of the training camp and all the practices. Same thing for you with your interview. You're going to focus on that specific organization, that specific role, those specific individuals, and then that game plan that you want to really attack and execute against. Well, at the end, sharing, hey, this is why I'm the best fit for this role. And at the end of the interview, if for some reason you're not asked, is there anything else you would like to add? Make sure you add in. Just say, before we end, I would like to share this, and make sure that you share that. Again, it's your time too. Yes, that interview might be 2 hours, 3 hours, and that organization might be bringing multiple individuals to interview you. Well, you want to take your time and say at the end of the day that you got everything across you wanted to, and you're going to feel so much better at the end of the day because you're going to have less stress during the actual interview itself, and you're going to be set up for future interviews because you're already going to have those resumes printed. You're already going to have those clothes bought, and maybe you just need to refresh them, maybe wash them, maybe you get dry cleaned again. But when you do enough of those things ahead of time, that each successive interview, it becomes easier and easier because you're going to continue to execute against that game plan you have. And maybe a game plan for a job in marketing, an interview in marketing versus a game plan for a job in accounting, maybe that there's a little bit of difference. But maybe you want and have an interest to potentially do both types of jobs. So then your game plan, right, it's going to change based on that subject matter, based on the individuals, based off of that organization. If that organization is an industrial company, like they produce steel, that you want to learn maybe a little bit about that industry so your questions can be a little bit more thoughtful versus a consumer packaged good product like Procter & Gamble has at many stores throughout the United States and throughout the world. Those are going to be the minor shifts that you make from interview to interview, but those things are going to be minor after you already have that foundation laid. Next, we're moving on to number 7. So those thank yous you've pre-addressed that have those stamps on. You take those 3 things, 3, 4, 5, however many those things, those bullet points, those goals that you accomplished from your game plan that you executed against, and you share that again in a thank you. And then you send that into the United States Postal Service. And the sooner you can get that thank you in the mail, regardless of how quickly the Postal Service works, the quicker that those individuals are going to get those cards in the mail. And so if we're looking at 3 individuals that interview for a job, you and 2 others, you and another candidate may send a thank you card, but maybe yours arrives within a day or 2, and the second candidate arrives 2 weeks later. So what can happen in 2 weeks? Those debrief meetings. And what do I mean by a debrief meeting? A debrief meeting is when the individuals who are in charge of the interview process for a particular role, they have a meeting together and they talk about who would be the best fit, the pros and the cons, not only meeting the responsibilities of that job, but with the organization, those individuals, that they being the interviewers, will talk through those candidates. And a lot of times, those decisions and those meetings are happening within a week of the interview process, right? So if those individuals receive your thank you card in the mail in 2 days, let's call it, and the other candidate who does the same thing just decides to mail it a little bit later, receive the cards 2 weeks after the interview process, the decision could already have been made whether that individual who sent the card 2 weeks late gets the job offer, or whether you get the job offer if that's a qualifying factor in that job. So after you accomplish the thank you notes and get those into the mail, you also want to send an email that would be helpful as well. So you can send that thank you email, and it can be just about exactly the same as the actual thank you card that's going to go in the mail. You're going to want to continue networking. You want to continue meeting people, connecting with people on LinkedIn, going to networking events, going to career fairs, applying to jobs that you have an interest in. You want to just continue that. And why? Why would you want to continue that if you feel great about how the interview process went? And maybe you do ultimately get offered that position. What you want to, I guess, protect against or mitigate against is that situation where that I talked about a little bit earlier, where I applied to a job, had an interview, the job was extended, and drug test was taken. I got a call from the HR representative at the organization, and she said, "Hey Justin, we'd love to keep this job extended to you, but you failed the drug test." And so that situation would cause some individuals some angst, and it did to me at that time. If it wasn't for myself and my mom going down to the actual drug test location and asking, because I knew that I hadn't taken any illegal substances that were being tested for. So once we went there and found out that there was basically a mix-up and that my test was negative, I wanted to make sure that the organization that did the drug test called the organization that I had applied to the job for, so they could be the ones telling the organization, "Hey, we screwed up." And so then I, in the future, received the call from the organization that I applied with, and they extended the job offer to me and said that they were sorry that the situation had occurred. So that's a reason why you want to continue networking until you're in that seat. And I would even argue until you get that first paycheck, keep networking, continue applying to jobs, continue interviewing where it makes sense, because at the end of the day, having options of where to work, where to negotiate your offer through is the best place to be. Whereas having one job offer is still a good place to be, but when you're able to compare 2 or 3 offers at the same time, if you're able to do that, that's really helpful, because what you can do then is what I talk about here in number 9 is be ready to negotiate. Be ready to take whatever offer comes your way and match that against your job offer worksheet that I talked about earlier. You're already going to have that information together of what's the most important, what's the second importance, third, and so on. You're going to have listed all those numbers and all those percents and all those things that are going to go next to it, that you're going to be able to take an offer and literally lay that right next to your job offer worksheet. And so you'll be able to say, okay, I need $50,000, I was offered 55, okay, check that box. And then you go down the road. Whereas when you want to negotiate, maybe the offer comes in at 40 and you need to be at 50, but you love the organization, the vibe you got from the individuals you interviewed with, and the work from home was going to be a good thing for you and your family, your significant other. It is going to save some money traveling, among other things. Those are going to be things that you're going to want to look at and say, okay, everything is great except the salary. Then you're going to want to negotiate. So don't think because if you're in college, you're in school, that you can't negotiate. Negotiate, because your future jobs are going to be that baseline from where you're going to go from. What I mean by that, let's say you end job 1 at $50,000. Well, when you go for job number 2 for that next move, potentially outside the organization, you're going to be asked, so what were you making at company A? And you're going to say, well, I was making $50,000. Whereas, okay, I was making $40,000, but I love the company, but I don't love it enough that I'm staying for an extended period of time. And so your negotiating power in the future is going to be diminished a little bit, even if you share reasons why you not that you deserve the additional money, but you earn the additional money, and you really should have been making this at this organization right now. And so those will be the things to think about. So having that job offer worksheet ready, when the offer comes, you'll be ready that day of. Some jobs offers, they come the day of the interview. Some come right after the interview itself. Maybe you meet with 3 individuals, and right after that, the offer is presented to you. Maybe, like one of my jobs, I was traveling a couple hours for this position that I was interviewing for. So I interviewed, and on my drive home, in that 2-hour span, I received the verbal job offer on my way driving home. And so I had that job offer worksheet ready, so I knew that what I was going to compare against when I got home, when I was going to take a look at the actual offer itself against what kind of my needs are, right? So the time has changed, I feel, where organizations always should have the leg up, and I feel that employees should be able to get what they want and what they earn. So with the education, with the skills, whether you start your own business, whether you intern with an organization, you volunteer, whatever that may be, you're worthy of what you are asking for. And on top of that, you've showed that through the interview process, with the resumes, with the LinkedIn profile, with your portfolio, with the business cards. All those things are really lining up. So the organization, they can decline the offer or not offer you at all. But you're more than able to do that job, and you're more than sufficient and qualified for that position. So don't discount yourself. If you do research online with friends, family, significant others, don't be afraid to share that information. And when you have, again, those 2 or 3 job offers, maybe one offers at $55,000 and the other one's at $45,000 per year. And maybe the job at $45,000 is the one you really want, but then there's $10,000 extra a year that you could potentially make. You're able to pin those 2 job offers against each other. The job offer you get in this hypothetical situation for $45,000, if you have that offer for $55,000, you can go back to that organization that you got that offer for $45,000 and say, look, I love everything about the organization. I love everything about this job. I am a great fit, as I've discussed, in these 3 areas, right? That we've talked about with your game plan and executing against it. But I really need to be at least 55 because I just got an offer from another organization. Then the organization that offered you 45, they can go back to the drawing board, which they do. I've been in those spots where we get counter offered, and we go back to the drawing table and say, okay, is this individual really somebody that we believe in and we want, or were we just trying to get somebody for the lowest salary, which sometimes, unfortunately, companies do. And so you'll know right then when that counter offer comes back accepted or not. So you could have, again, had that great vibe coming from that organization, but they didn't want to accept your counter offer. Then in the end, it wasn't meant to be. So without getting into philosophy and those types of subjects, things happen for a reason, and there's a reason why in that hypothetical that organization didn't accept your counter offer. Maybe it was so you could get more experience in other areas at this other job, so that could help leverage you to maybe a 2 title jump in your next position. We don't know, and there's things, as I'm here at 40 years old, that I'm finding that many years ago, things are starting to click, whether those are connections, whether the things that I'm doing, whether those are media appearances, whether me having the opportunity to be in front of you and share my best practices that I've had, not only in the classroom, sharing with my students, but also with individuals, through my organization, the House of You, and through my books and my works. So be ready to negotiate. And so lastly, I want to just share from the mental health perspective. So I've shared a little bit about like the stress and a little bit about kind of my story. And so I just want to share that everybody has mental health. It's mental health isn't something that you can see. You can't see like a sprained ankle or a cut or a scrape. That it is something and it is real. So this whole seminar, when I talk about lowering stress and giving you the best opportunity to succeed, those are things that I've learned throughout my mental health journey, throughout the 40 years of my life, and those have really, now that I've accepted kind of where my mental health, my mental illnesses are, that now I'm able to do even more work. I'm able to implement that mental health at a human level before we even get to a professional level. So we just need to make sure that we're staying as healthy as can be. And doesn't mean that you have to eat healthy 24 hours a day, every meal that you have, but whatever's healthy for you, whatever helps you, gives you the most energy, that gets you in the best frame of mind, do whatever you need to do. Don't let friends and family members and significant others kind of guide you astray. Take that information, but if you need to talk to somebody, then do it. If you need to take medication, then do it. I never thought that I would, but it's something that once I was able to do that and kind of just accept that, okay, this is why things happen and why I feel the way I do in certain situations, I'm able to apply that again here in this professional sense to help lower your stress and anybody that checks this seminar out, to make them just a better person, more effective, more efficient, that when you do go for that day of the interview, that you really aren't as anxious, as stressed as you were maybe in that previous interview. So that's really the goal of this seminar. And I want to just thank everybody for tuning in and being a part of this. You can find this seminar as well as many other products that we have at thehouseofyou.com. I want to give a big thank you to Walsh University for letting us use their studio here today. And I also want to give a big thank you to Kayla Ann Mullins and Courtney Weichel from Kent State University. They're in the American Sign Language and English Interpreting Program at Kent State University. Again, it's not just important to share by the spoken word. I know there's individuals that might not be able to do that, and so that's one of the reasons I wanted to include the sign language interpretation with this seminar, because like all my organizations and all the work I do, I want to be as inclusive as possible and give everybody the best opportunity for success. Thank you.